So thank you for that introduction, Astria, and hello, everyone. I'm very, very excited to be here with you all virtually. And so yes, this is Keeping It 100, how to have healthy relationships. So I like to start by just giving an overview of what I'm going to cover. I personally love that with presenters, so I want to do that for you all as well. And so today I'm going to cover healthy relationships, toxic relationships, boundaries, communication, and resources. But I feel like it is only fair that since you will be listening to me for the next 45 minutes that you get to know me a little bit. So I use she, her pronouns. As Astria said, I'm a prevention education specialist. That is my full-time job. My part-time job is with our Odyssey, as mentioned. And I also like to use the term advocate many different aspects of my life and for lots of different groups. Giraffes are my favorite animal. You can't tell because this is virtual, but I'm really short and I love giraffes because they're everything I'm not. They're tall and graceful. I also have my black belt in karate, and my friends describe me as aggressively complimentary, and they're not wrong, to be honest. And the last thing I wanted to share is a quote that is my absolute favorite quote. It keeps me going when things get hard, and that is by Robert Pine. And it is, what we do for ourselves dies with us. What we do for others and the world remains and is immortal. So I just wanted to share that with you all and let you get to know me a little bit more. So as you know, we're going to be talking about relationships. Now, oftentimes when I do a program or a talk about relationships, people automatically assume that we're going to be talking about romantic relationships. And while yes, that is definitely a huge part of our lives at different points, that's not the only relationship that you have in your life, right? So today we're going to be talking about relationships in general. So that includes your classmates, your teachers, romantic partners, friends, family, caregivers, all of those people. You have relationships with all of those different people. And as I'm sure you know, those relationships can be fantastic, right? They can bring us joy and support and acceptance, but those same relationships can also bring us pain, loneliness, and betrayal. And so for us to really talk about how to have healthy relationships and how to really keep our relationships in that positive end of that and not the negative, we need to talk about what a healthy relationship actually is and what that looks like. But before I do that, I would really love for you all to just take a minute and type into the chat box before you do this. Again, going to reiterate what they have said. Make sure when you do that, that you click to where it goes to panelists and attendees. Otherwise, it will only be me, Astria, and Alex who will see it, and the other attendees will not. So I would love for you all to type 3 characteristics of what you look for in a healthy relationship. Just 3, not 25, not 4, just 3, if you don't mind. And I'm going to pull that up so I can see them. We've got communication, loyalty, and trust. Love that. Honesty, communication, trust, love. You all really like communication. So good. We're going to talk about that. What else? We've got kindness, personality, patience. You all are filling this up. Yes, compassion, support, understanding, openness, empathy. Yes. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I asked you all this. So I'll share mine because it's only fair that I shared my top 3, right? If I'm asking you to as well. And so my top 3 for myself are open-mindedness, kindness, and acceptance. Those are like my top 3. There's many more, but those are like my top 3. We've got a lot of loyalty coming up as well. You all can keep going through that, but because I want to honor your time, I'm going to go ahead and keep going. So I want to be sure that, so this list is obviously not comprehensive, right? You all brought up some really great ones that I don't have on my list. Which is why I asked you, because it's really cool how there are different priorities that we have for ourselves, and no one's right or wrong in that, right? And so, but these are kind of those core things that we really want to have in order to have a healthy relationship. And that is mutual respect, trust, honesty, compromise, individuality, good communication, anger control, understanding, and self-confidence. And so I want to be really clear. The reason I asked you all to really share those different characteristics is because, again, my list is not comprehensive, right? What is going to be most important to you might not be on this list, and that's okay. That can still be really important to you because we're all individuals, and that's like a beautiful thing about relationships. Now, the part you don't get to have your own take on is toxic, because that is a fact. So when we talk about toxic relationships, I want to be really clear. I'm not talking about abusive. So if you think of relationships on like a scale, healthy is our goal, right? We all want to have healthy relationships. Then we have toxic, where things are unhealthy, and then we have abusive. And so I want to be clear, because later on I'm going to share resources, and I want to be clear that those resources are not for abusive. If you are in a relationship that is abusive in any way, shape, or form, the resource is 911 and a trusted adult. Okay, so putting that out there now. But when we talk about toxic, these are things that can happen from like healthy relationships can become toxic. And what that means is things like control, hostility, dishonesty, disrespect, dependence, intimidation, apathy, low self-confidence. And the reason, and I'm going to go over a couple of these because sometimes youth have expressed confusion with some of these. So dependence is one of those. And I want to be clear, I'm very aware that in all of our relationships, there's an amount of dependence that comes with that, right? Whether it's our caregivers who we depend on for basic needs getting met, to our friendships who we depend on for support, love, care, all of those things. So when I say dependence, I mean dependence to a point where someone is using it to control or manipulate you, okay? And so dependence to a point where you're stuck or you're trapped, and that dependence is being used against you, okay? So I wanna make that clear. Depending on people is not a bad thing. That is not toxic. I also want to define apathy. So I'm sure you all have heard the words sympathy and empathy. So that's when we feel for someone else. So if someone is going through a really hard time, we feel for them. We're able to either we've been through something similar or we haven't, but we're able to feel what they might be going through. Apathy is when someone doesn't feel that for you. They don't feel sadness for you when you are sad. They don't feel upset when you are upset. That is not okay, right? We need people in our lives who are caring. And then low self-confidence, we're actually going to go over the importance of self-confidence in a minute. But there is one more thing I want to make clear. A lot of times when I do a program like this, sometimes people think that they get to decide what they are worthy or deserve. And I want to be very, very clear about this. Each and every one of you and everyone on this planet deserves healthy relationships, always and forever. No matter what you think of yourself, no matter what you have been told, no matter what you have been made to feel, I am here to tell you, it's a fact, that you deserve healthy relationships. No one deserves toxic. And so I say that because oftentimes I have youth who maybe don't have a high self-esteem or don't see their self-worth. And we all have times that we go through that, right? Well, maybe there's parts of ourselves maybe we don't love or we don't celebrate. And that's human and that's normal. But as your presenter, I'm going to tell you this right there is a fact. So sorry, not sorry. You all are worthy of healthy, happy relationships. Hate to break that to you. Now, defining and giving characteristics of healthy versus toxic doesn't actually help that much, right? Because you're just looking at this like, cool, yeah, I knew this, Anna, thank you. So what actually makes up a healthy relationship? And so there are components. There's about 5 components that really make those up. And so that first one is communication, which I absolutely love that so many of you brought that out. And the reason that communication is so important is not just about how you communicate and you making sure that you are expressing your needs and wants and desires and your feelings, but also being able to listen. Because if 2 people in a relationship are both expressing themselves, but no one's listening, it's not really going to work, right? Then the expressing yourself doesn't go anywhere if there's no one there to listen and to be there to want to take that information and use it in a way that it needs to be used. So when we say communication, it is about expressing yourself as well as listening. and being able to take what someone is sharing and listen to that and take that and put that into action. We're going to talk more about communication because it's so important. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Now, the next one is agreements or boundaries. So those are simply rules to help connect with each other. Now, I like to use the word boundaries around this because I feel like that is first of all, that's a term and a phrase that I just love. You can ask my friends, they get slightly annoyed with me with how often I talk about boundaries. And when they talk about boundaries, they say they're pulling an Anna, which like, what a compliment, thank you. But when we talk about agreements, it's things that we agree in order to help us stay connected and kind of keep that mutual respect, right? So I'm gonna go into boundaries and agreements in more detail, but just one example right off the top is with your friends, right? We're on social media all the time. We're posting pictures and things all the time. And it can be that if your friend's going to post a picture of you, an agreement is that I got to say yes to that first, right? I know for myself, I'm totally cool with embarrassing pictures to a degree. They're levels of embarrassing, right? And so I know for myself, like that's an agreement I have with my friends and with my sisters, because on our birthdays, we always post embarrassing pictures of each other, but we have to approve them first, right? So those are just basic agreements to help us stay connected and have mutual respect. The next one is connections. And so when I say connections, I'm talking about connections outside of whatever relationship that is. So this one is so important. And oftentimes when I do this, I have varying programs like this one for different ages. So what I can say in a high school, I can't really say in a middle school sometimes, but I have this program for middle school as well. And oftentimes when I share this part, at least at the schools that I go into, it is often part of the culture in middle school that if you get into a romantic relationship, that means you stop talking to your friends. I don't know that that's how it is in all middle schools or in high school as well, but it's really, really important to keep those outside relationships intact and to keep being active and present in those for a number of reasons. And one of those is that different people in our lives give us different things, right? Like I know there are people in my life who I can go to if I've had a really heavy day at work. And like Astria shared, where I work full time is at a sexual violence resource and children's advocacy center. So a heavy day for me can oftentimes be a level of heavy that a lot of people never deal with. And so I have certain friends who are really good at being able to hear that and are able to hear, about my day and support me through that. And then I have other friends who I know that if I just need a laugh, I can go to them, right? And so we have different people in our life who can do different things for us. And it's really important to maintain those because one person cannot fulfill everything for you. That is unrealistic. So maintaining those connections is so important. Now, the next one is the balance. And that is like give and take on both sides. And I hope you notice the word equal give and take. The word equal is not there, and that is for a reason, right? So when I say give and take, I mean emotionally, there's support, financially, all these different things. There's going to be give and take when it comes to relationships. But the reason I don't have the word equal in there is because sometimes we go through really hard things, right? And we're going through hard things when you're not in a place to be able to give, but we really need to take support and take those things from our friends and our support system as opposed to we don't have a lot to give. And that's okay. That's going to happen. There's going to be times when there's more give and take on one side than the other. However, it doesn't need to be a constant unbalanced give and take, because oftentimes that can really breed resentment, even if it's not meant to. So for example, in the beginning of COVID-19, as it is in my bio, like I have a rare disease, which means I'm still self-isolating right now for my safety and my health, which means I went from being fully independent to not being able to safely go and get my own groceries, which is a huge adjustment. So my give and take with my friends here in town changed drastically because I was suddenly having to get them to get groceries for me. But I'm still able to be there for them emotionally and call them and see what's going on. So it's not just completely one-sided. And the last one is self-esteem. And so this one is so vitally important. And when we say self-esteem, I don't mean just your own self-esteem, but also the other person. So I want to be clear, and I'm sure you all have heard this phrase before, of someone loving you doesn't equal you loving yourself, or whatever like variation of that. I have very like mixed feelings on that, because I feel like people in our lives can help us see parts of ourselves that maybe we don't see as beautiful and wonderful, and they help us realize how great it is. And I think that's a really beautiful part of relationships. However, it is really important that we don't put our entire self-worth and self-esteem on someone else and dependent of someone else. Because A, that's not fair to you or to them. And so in a relationship, your self-esteem should never be torn apart. It should never be dropped down. But at the same time, there's going to be times when you might be challenged by someone in a relationship, right? And that's healthy. Your pride might take a hit sometimes, but your self-esteem shouldn't. And it also means that vice versa, that you should also be viewing that person, the other person, in a really positive and caring way, and that your self-esteem should not plummet from being in this relationship and being connected to each other. So I'm going to talk about boundaries more, because as I already shared, I'm very passionate about boundaries. So we all have boundaries. And when I say boundaries, there's kind of different types. There's physical, there's emotional, there's personal, there's all different types. And boundaries are different for everyone. And they are simply the line between what you're comfortable with and also what you're uncomfortable with. And so those are different for everyone, and they're constantly changing depending on where you're at, who you're with, the relationship with the person, your mood or feelings, if you're hangry, like there's all kinds of things that affect our boundaries. But the bottom line is, boundaries do not have to be understood. So no one in your relationship, whether it's a parent, a friend, a teacher, a partner, they do not have to understand the why of your boundaries. They simply have to respect them. And that is very, very important. Now, I have been talking a lot, and I found a couple of TikToks. I'm not that cool. I just tried really hard to be cool for you all, because I know how not cool I am. But I found some TikToks that I want to play for you all. I'm going to play both of them twice because they're TikToks, and one of them has text, and I want you all to have time to read them.
Don't want to do that. If you do that, I'm going to do that. If you do that, I'm going to do that. If you do this, I'm going to do that.
Well, what if I just did it?
You don't want to do that. If you do that, I'm going to do that. If you do that, I'm going to do that. If you do this, I'm going to do that.
Well, what if I just did it?
You don't want to do that. If you do that,
first TikTok. That is a body positive influencer that I absolutely love and adore. She's also on Instagram. And this is the next one.
Another PSA. Again, don't care if this flops. Again, stop asking me if I'm sure that I'm a male. Because I'm sure. On to the video! Boundaries. Every person has them. Don't push your luck. If somebody tells you that something makes them uncomfortable, don't push that. Don't care who you are. It doesn't matter who you are. You don't push somebody's boundaries. If you accidentally cross somebody's boundaries by mistake, that's different. But that's only if they haven't told you. That's normally when you tell them like, hey, this makes me uncomfortable. Stop. But if you cross those boundaries on purpose, I don't like you. Boundaries are set for a reason. To keep somebody's mental and physical being safe, as well as to avoid situations that they may not have liked that happened in the past. Even if that past situation had nothing to do with you. I don't care about your age, status, or gender. Respect boundaries. You're not entitled to somebody else's life. Thank you.
All right. Okay. I'm going to do the share thing correctly this time. New share. One second, you all. Technology is not a thing that I'm good at. So I really loved those TikToks a lot because they show the importance of boundaries, but also I like the different perspectives. One is a middle-aged woman, and then one is a youth, and I just tried to be cool for you all. I think a really important part when we talk about boundaries, talk about healthy relationships, is communication, right? You all were already very aware of how important that is. And so how we communicate is very, very important. And so I want to go over a couple of different communication styles and to maybe help you understand maybe how you're communicating at times and what we want to strive to communicate. And so that first one is passive. And so passive communication is where you really aren't expressing anything. You're not expressing your feelings, you're not expressing your needs or your wants, and you're kind of ignoring those things and also allowing others to do so as well. And what that might look like in an actual situation is deferring to others when it comes to like decision making in order to like avoid conflict or tension. Now, aggressive is obviously the exact opposite of passive. Okay, so that is where someone is very expressive in their feelings, their needs, and their wants at the expense of others. And so it often looks like they are ignoring others' needs in order to support their own. And so oftentimes when someone is communicating aggressively, when they are confronted with that, they can be very defensive or hostile. Now, there is a super fun combination of the two called passive aggressive, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And so passive aggressive is where someone appears to be passive kind of on the surface. They don't use their words. They don't express any of their feelings or their needs through their words. But then their behavior shows that they are actually upset and angry and not happy with what's happening. And they show that through like not verbal communication, so like eye rolling, the silent treatment, turning their back on you, avoiding conversation, things like that. And then there's assertive. And assertive communication is when you are direct and honest about your thoughts and your feelings and your needs, but you're also still respecting the feelings, ideas, and needs of others. And so I want to also acknowledge that you are never going to always communicate assertively. As we are humans, we get upset, we get stressed, we get hangry, life happens. As someone who has been told professionally and personally that I'm a great communicator, I can be very real with you all and say, I do those three sometimes, and it hurts me when I look back at times and see that I did that because it's just not effective. So I want to be really clear. I don't want you to leave here and think that like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible communicator. What did Anna tell me? I'm passive, I'm aggressive, I'm both, and like freak out. Because we are going to always communicate sometimes and default some of these things, especially when our boundaries or agreements our boundaries are being pushed up against, or someone broke an agreement in a relationship, right? And sometimes we communicate in these other ways as a defense mechanism, right? Sometimes we're passive just to get through the moment because we just want to get through it. We don't want to deal with conflict. We're overwhelmed and we don't want to do it. Sometimes we're aggressive because we're feeling so many things that the anger and the aggression is coming out. And sometimes we're a super fun combination of the two. But we want to strive to be assertive. And the reason for that is not only does it show that you respect your own boundaries and your needs and wants enough to voice them, but it also sets the expectation that they need to be respected. And that is so, so important when it comes to relationships, is you being able to set that expectation because you are showing you respect those things in yourself as well. Now, communication, when you talk about it, can sound really simple. But I know that it can be really, really difficult to find the words and communicate assertively when someone has violated your boundary or broken an agreement. So I wanted to just give some like easy ways of how to respond when there's conflict. Because there's going to be conflict, even with your best of friends or the best relationship, there's going to be conflict because again, we are human. And so if someone breaks your boundary or pushes up against one of your boundaries, if you feel safe to speak to them directly, the thing you want to do is you want to tell them the boundary that they violated. You want to make sure that they know that that was a boundary and what that actually means, okay? You don't have to explain the why. I want to make that very clear. You never have to explain the why of your boundary and why something is a boundary for you. But it is important that you share what the boundary itself is to make sure they understand moving forward. The next thing you want to share is how it made you feel when they broke it. And the reason that is because it can be really, really easy, especially amongst friends, to joke something off or to tease things away and make things not a big deal. I know for myself, with a lot of my friends, we have very like teasing and joking relationships. But we also know how to get serious when we're not joking, and we need to take things really seriously. And so it's important to say how it made you feel. The next thing you want to do is you want to tell them what they could do better. So what can they do instead of that? Or what is something in place of what they did, all right? So for example, so for me, with my rare disease, one of my boundaries is I don't like people to Google my condition. Just don't. And again, not going to tell you all the why because I don't have to, but that is a boundary for me. I don't like my friends to Google my condition. So I wanted a friend who is she's naturally just very curious. And she did it anyway. And I knew she did it because she started to treat me differently, which is why I don't like people to Google it. And so I sat her down, I told her, and I was like, I specifically asked you not to do this. You did this, and that made me very upset. It made me feel very disrespected, and it made me feel like you weren't listening and you don't care that I told you that I asked you not to do this. Instead, if you have questions about my condition, you need to ask me directly and not go to Google. That's how it was. Now, was she uncomfortable? Yes. Was I uncomfortable? Yes. But now she comes directly to me when she has a question, and our relationship is actually stronger now because we're able to communicate this way. Now, because we're not all angels, sometimes we might accidentally violate someone's boundary. And that can be really, really hard, and it can be really difficult to know what to do after that, especially when it was on accident and it's someone you care about and it affected them heavily. So again, if you feel safe to speak to them directly, the first thing you want to do is apologize. It is very, very important that you apologize and say directly, I am sorry that I did this. Not I'm sorry if, I'm sorry that. That is very important. The next thing you want to do is you want to ask them to share that boundary with you and to explain it. Now, when I say explain it, again, do not mean the why. I mean you want to ask them to share that boundary with you because you might have only seen a glimpse, or you're only seeing what you perceived in that situation, and you want to give them the space to be able to share with you, this is my entire boundary, so that you, moving forward, now know, so you don't do it again in the future. And again, you want to follow that up with, okay, so what can I do better? Or what could I have done instead of this? Because then not only are you listening, but you're also giving them the space to share with you what they need in place of that. And that is so, so important. Now, you all are youth, as you are very much aware. And so I love youth so much in the age that you all are, but I also know it's a really uncomfortable age to be at because you're in this weird in between of you're not children, but you're not adults. So you can make some decisions and there's some that you can't, and it's very confusing for you at times. And I want to be really clear that when it comes to your relationships, because you are not adults yet, it's really, really important that you get a trusted adult involved, especially when you feel overwhelmed and when it feels like it's too much to handle. Even if you think that maybe someone else would be able to handle it who's a youth, it doesn't matter. If you feel overwhelmed, get a trusted adult involved. It is not your job to handle everything on your own. The other situations that you need to get a trusted adult involved is if that person wants to harm themselves or others, or if an adult is causing harm, or if violence has occurred, and I mean violence of any kind. In that case, I do not want you to put yourself at risk and put yourself in jeopardy in order to communicate a boundary. Because at that point, it is no longer toxic, it is abusive. And your safety is like #1 priority, obviously. Now, I want to be really clear about something, and that is that no matter how you communicate, whether you're passive aggressive, or assertive, no matter what, if someone breaks your boundary, it is not your fault. Never, never, ever, ever. It is not your fault. If someone knowingly is violating your boundary, that is a toxic relationship. And if they're violating a boundary in a way that involves violence, that is abusive. I want to make that very clear. It is never your fault, no matter how you communicate. That is not on you. So I want to make that very clear, because sometimes when we talk about communication styles and how to communicate our boundaries, it can make sometimes some victim blaming kind of things can come up. Not saying that did come up for you, but it can. And so I want to just put this out there, like, not your fault, ever. So resources. So the first bullet point I have up here is the My Plan app, and it is my absolute favorite resource when it comes to relationships. And I have used it myself. I give this resource out in every single program that I do. It's a free app because I'm cheap and I'm not about to expect you all to pay money for an app. It's a free app, and it includes an anonymous survey that you can take either for yourself or for others. And what it does is it determines the areas of improvement in a relationship. So let's say you put in there and it tells you, like, hey, communication is something like this, that this relationship needs more communication or more effective communication or something like that. Now, it doesn't just stop at that. It doesn't just like rate like your relationship and be like, wow, your relationship is terrible, good luck. Like, it doesn't do that. It then gives you actual ways to work on those areas. Now, the really great thing about this app also, I don't have it in the description because I told you all we're talking about toxic, but sometimes it can be really difficult if we are in a toxic, borderline abusive relationship to know if it's abusive. And so this survey also will rate the danger level of a relationship. And again, it doesn't just rate the danger level, say you're in danger and be like, good luck with that. It gives you steps to take and helps you actually create a safety plan for yourself or for a loved one. Again, it's one of my favorite apps. The other thing, another resource, is to reach out to your friends, family, or a trusted adult. And I know that can sound real dumb to put on here as a resource. But remember earlier, we talked about the importance of connections in other relationships and outside of relationships. Sometimes when we're in a toxic relationship, we are made to feel really isolated from the rest of the people in our life. And we are made to feel like we can't go to them, or they don't support us, or they don't love us. And in abusive relationships, we get cut off from those. And so I put this on here as a reminder of those people are still available to you. And also, if it's not abusive and it's toxic, I think it's really important to reach out to friends and family or a trusted adult if you're having issues in a relationship, because people who honor and respect your boundaries can provide you with such wonderful support and validation and advice, because they are already showing you respect and things like that other person might not be. And I just think that's so, so important. The other one is the crisis text line. And I know you all have seen this like a lot of times. I think it's in the chat box right now too. And you might wonder why it's on here. But I wanted to define crisis for you all, because crisis means a time of intense difficulty, trouble, or danger. And so that means like you can be in crisis but not be in danger. You can be in crisis in a relationship and not be unsafe. And I want to make that very clear. Because especially if you deal with things like anxiety or mental health things, you can be in crisis and not be in physical danger. And you can still use a resource like the crisis text line. And so I wanted to provide that because, again, it's free. It's 24/7 support and information, and it's not a local thing. So I know a lot of you are from smaller towns, and I'm sure that you have centers in your towns or in your region that can support you, but I also am from a small town, and I know that it is really difficult to believe that things actually stay confidential. Even if they do, it's really hard to believe that when you're from a small town. And so this crisis text line is something I really love to give out in my region because it's not connected to our region in any way, so we will feel very safe to get support through that. Now, that's all I got, everybody. If you have questions or comments, or you need an aggressive compliment, I already put that on there for you all. Before we take questions, I do want to point out that I did provide my 2 different email addresses. My one for where I do prevention programming, and then also my rare disease organization. I did put my username for social media with a caveat, and that is because I do a lot of advocacy. My profile is public. I have a lot of different influencers and things that I interact with and things like that. If you want to keep up with that kind of advocacy and things like that, you can follow me. I will not follow you back because boundaries. So just putting that out there. Now, does anyone have any questions?